listen, it's been really good to set this thing up. Let me first of all say it's been an incredible couple of weeks in the world of tech. I don't think anybody can't not be aware as to the situations that have been going on. I think with regards to probably the thing that kicked it off for me was the kind of revenue reports, the Q3 revenue reports from all of the big players. They all had to announce. Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, all of them stepped up. And of course, all of them had underperformed their projections, significantly so. And then there was following kind of this crescendo of layoffs. Some big organizations started to make those announcements. Mark Zuckerberg, Meta, the first time ever, I believe, that Facebook had made any sort of redundancies. So that was a remarkable episode. And of course, then you had, Elon Musk just piling in and, firing people on Twitter, like immediately out there. So it looks like it's a big tech winter. It looks like certainly there's lots of people that are going to be let go. There's going to be hiring freezes going into 2023. Mark Zuckerberg has said hiring freeze from Q1 2023. So how are these tech layoffs going to impact the stuff, the tech labor market in general? That's the topic of today's conversation. So let's get on with this chat. Let's do some introductions first of all. Raul, I'll leave you to the end because I want you to say a few words about sort of the platform. So let's start off with you, Gianluca. Gianluca, can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Of course, Hang, and lovely to be here with all of you. I think we will be sharing and learning a lot about what's happening in different industries. Short introduction, my name is Gianluca Rosani. I am director of talent, tech, and product and blockchain in Bitpanda. So I'm into the crypto world. I will be able to share some insights there. And nothing, I'm here to help our industry scale. I have seen a lot of gap between English and Spanish correlation. I mean, US, Europe, and Latin America. So I'm here to help our industry to scale.
That's right. We haven't even, I didn't even talk about crypto. I mean, that's another thing that's blowing up right now. So there's all kinds of chaos in the world today. So great to have you on here, Gianluca. Let's go to you, Anton. Anton, who are you? What is you do, sir?
Yeah, so I'm Anton, co-founder of a business called ScreenLoop. We're a talent operations platform which plugs into your ATS and gives you a variety of tools which aren't historically offered by the ATS to bring analytics, data, D&I insights, but was previously at a business called Stack Overflow. So very much been in the tech industry, helping people hire engineers for the last 12 years. So here to offer any insights that I can.
Fantastic. Go to you, Christine.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Christine. So I'm currently head of talent at Quantum Motion. So we are a quantum computing startup that predominantly hires in hardware and electronics, but recently more in machine learning. So going back to what I know, but I spent the last 8 years working across web dev. So yeah, my first time going to a more hardware role, and yeah, keen to hear from others in the team to see what the landscape's looking like.
Great. And Raul, great to see you, sir. Can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do? And why Terminal is as cool as it is?
Sounds good, Hung. Great to be here. So I'm Raul. I'm the general manager in Europe of Terminal. Terminal is a Series B scale-up. We're based out of San Francisco. And in short, we help companies build remote teams of software engineers around the world. We do two things. We give companies access to a talent marketplace that enables them to get access to vetted engineers in places like Europe, Latin America, and Canada. And then we also have entities in all these markets that we're in that enable you to have a best-in-class EOR service, employer of record, employing engineers with top-of-the-line benefits in every market that we're in. So that's Terminal. And we've had a fantastic run, placed about 1,000 engineers globally in great companies. Before this, I founded a business called Snap HR, a talent marketplace in the UK, working with startups and scale-ups. So thrilled to be here, Hung, in your esteemed company.
And the OGs remember Snap HR, don't they?
Yeah.
Absolutely, great product out there. Okay, let's just throw the sort of conversation in a very open manner to begin with. What is the conversation like internally in your businesses right now about the state of the market given what we've seen and heard with regards to these big tech sort of layoffs and what have you, how is that generally feeling? What's the conversational tone within the businesses that you're in? Christine, let's go to you first with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're very small. We're 25 plus another 20 PhDs. And I think we're just catching up earlier. We are still hiring, but we've been, hiring quite slowly and not, exponentially. So actually, when we see the news, like the Twitter news, the team's been following it on Twitter every day. So I think there's obviously a slight, not panic, but just an uncertainty in terms of the market. A lot of our team's friends are being impacted. So I think the best thing, we touch wood, nothing has quite happened for us just yet, but I think you can definitely tell there's an uncertainty amongst the teams. I'm seeing it with candidates as well when I'm speaking to candidates, and we'll talk more about it later. But just in terms of, what's the job security going to look like? What is your runway looking like? So I think there's a lot of things to think about if you're still hiring, but that's what we're seeing. Just a lot of question marks in terms of where the business will be going and whether we're going to be doing the same.
You know what? That initially, that's already the first important point, isn't it? Like even if you're not directly affected as a business, the conversational, the discourse has that spillover effect, and you can't insulate yourself from it or can't insulate your business from it. The entire sense of stress is just increased market wide. There's no developer right now that isn't entranced by what's going on Twitter. I'm sure they're all refreshing to see who else that Elon Musk has fired today. That kind of stuff is a sensation, but it also causes this sort of ambient stress level just to increase. Like, what does it mean when you have a hugely high profile organization like Twitter make these like massive cuts? We're talking like 50% happened on week one. It's now look as if they're going to 80%. It's like, I think latest today is that he said, listen, if you're not prepared to go hardcore, then I'll accept your resignation. So, the company's going to go down from 7,000 to about 2,000 in about 2 weeks. So that's an incredible kind of crunch down. And that's got to affect the wider marketplace, in that way. Let's go to you, Anton. How's things happening with you, both within ScreenLoop as a startup that's growing, but also, of course, because you're supplying other companies as well. Like, you're interacting with a lot of these businesses. What's the general sentiment has been from your perspective?
Yeah, internally at ScreenLoop, we're in quite a good position. We're still relatively young with a decent runway, but the businesses that we speak to, I think to Christine's point, it's the uncertainty. So we speak to heads of talent, chief people officers, and a lot of these people aren't sure about what tomorrow holds, let alone 2-3 months down the line. And some of the businesses are still being told to hire as always, but they know that could switch at any point in any moment in any given time. So there is just a lot of uncertainty and unease within every person that we speak to at the moment, whether it be someone the most senior within an organization or just the junior members of the talent acquisition.
Yeah, very interesting. How about you, Gianluca? Let's go to you with this.
I would blow up with the crypto market right now, but as you all know, I don't know if you heard about these FTX and Binance collapse a couple of days ago. We have had similar things already in the industry because it's very new, like Luna, Celsius, Three Arrow Capital, and some others. But as our industry is so new, all these blows, what are making to us is that there's a lack of trust in the industry for now, right? So all the people that are around, if they are not genuinely interested in working at crypto or Web3 or blockchain, and it's getting harder to get it through there. So what's happening in the crypto industry is that, and this is natural in all bear markets and bull markets, but when there's always a bear market plus recession, in this case that it's stronger, there's a lot of market consolidation. So from the 17,000 players that we have, we will see many disappearing, as we just saw with FTX, Alameda Research, and all of those. So there will be a lot of market consolidation, and of course we're seeing people buying less and taking it out more, or saving the crypto in some wallet. So we're seeing an industry that it's very new, in a market consolidation phase, and of course with an uncertainty, as Anton and Christine shared.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Raul, let's bring you into this conversation also. You're GMing the UK sort of function of it, but I wonder whether you could give us some observations on the UK side, but also via your dialogue with your compatriots in different regions, like what's the atmosphere you're getting?
Yeah, absolutely, Hung. So a couple of things. I mean, firstly, in general, we're seeing, you know, the volume of open roles that we have at Terminal since the peaks at the beginning of the year. I mean, they've dropped, right, since those times. Probably can't be too specific on numbers, but you know, the drop is, you know, it's around 20% or thereabouts. So that's probably to be expected to some degree with companies slowing down their hiring. The other thing that's interesting that we're seeing is a lot of companies are scheduling meetings and kickoffs with us to Q1 next year. And so we actually expect that Q1 starts to become quite a busy time for startups hiring. Now, fully appreciate the FANGs maybe punting slightly longer, but we are seeing a lot of scale-ups and startups schedule, you know, hiring activity around that time. So I wonder if Anton is seeing something similar there, but that's absolutely something that's noticeable. And the third thing is, you know, to echo Christine, we're seeing candidates really be far more concerned and doing more due diligence on companies, right? So, you know, even though theoretically there's more candidates in the marketplace, we're still seeing candidates more skeptical to jump, to join new opportunities. So it's not necessarily an easy way of hiring candidates just because we think there are layoffs or, you know, we assume there's more in the market.
That's really interesting. And by the way, in terms of the overall drop-off of vacancies, I think that's actually confirmed. It's been validated by aggregators like Indeed, for instance, where they've spotted a general trend down, but a significant trend down with the tech component of it. So it seems that there is a sense that you know, the halcyon days of the big tech is kind of over. You know, let's scale to the entire size of the planet. And then worry about profits later. I don't know whether any of you saw that list of the top 15 biggest unicorns that went around. And they were like gambling as to which of these is going to pop first, because all of them had been running at a loss of more than 3 billion cumulative. So the WeWorks, the Ubers, even Airbnb, which surprised me, none of them have actually ever made any profit at any quarter throughout their entire fundraising journey, which is amazing to think about, because we've been using these tools and products for most of this decade. You know, how many of us have sat in a WeWork and worked out of it? How many of us got an Uber? How many of us done Airbnb? How many of us have got a Deliveroo? We've just like feasted on all of this service, but none of them have ever made profit. They've all been dependent on the VC money going in. And if that spigot turns off, then suddenly you're going to see changes of service. It's going to affect people on the at the consumer level, which is going to be very interesting. Raul, you mentioned sort of one point, which I think is a key thing to just sit on a little bit, which is this potential release of big tech, particularly FANG-based talent into the marketplace. That could be perceived as an opportunity for companies, because suddenly, you know, can we now take some of this talent, which previously would be outcompeted by, because those brands are too big, they're too powerful. But you're saying that's not necessarily the case, because their aversion is, or the expectation is still at that high level. Their aversion is too high. Anybody got any sort of experience with hiring people from the FANG particularly? What's your thoughts on this? Like, do people behave differently having gone through that experience? I don't know. Christine, you're nodding your head, so you're gonna have to answer this one.
Well, not in this current market, right? But definitely, when I was at the FT, we definitely had candidates over from Facebook, well, now Meta, on the data science side. Also, you know, they definitely have a very high opinion of themselves, and that's totally understandable, right? Because you work in a big company. But, you know, it couples with high salaries, high expectations, public stock options. You know, if you're not even in that field or even anywhere close to what their base salary is, you know, you can forget about it. So I actually have a really good friend who was at Meta, and I was speaking to him just the other day saying, you know, how's it looking? And he's posting stuff on LinkedIn saying, you know, I'm here to help. And I was like, do any of your friends that's being affected need any support? And he said, no, because actually what you forget is these big FAANG companies have huge alumni networks. So actually they just lean on their former Facebook, Meta, Google, etc. networks to find their next role. So that was interesting to see, because either it's one or two things, right? Firstly, they either want to go solo or become an entrepreneur and freelance. If you're, have the specific technical skills, or even marketing skills or advertising skills, this might be the time for them to go off and do their own thing, which might be something they've always wanted to do, but they couldn't because in a big tech company. And then, of course, back to my point about the alumni network, is they would just leverage the existing network. There might be people who left companies 5-6 years ago, set up their own companies, and just want to hire, their former colleagues, right? So, in terms of what Raul was saying about looking out for security, it's your buddy that you worked with in the past. You go and build stuff together, so that you can have a grand old time with them, even if it might not work out, right? So it's actually interesting to find in these big tech companies, they just heavily lean on their existing network.
How fascinating. And Andre Dos Santos, good to see you, sir, has asked a very good question about that. And he's put it in the Q&A. Like, are they just ghosts? So you see all of these lists of people going around, and Andre, I'm guessing you've hit them up and you've got zero response, right? This may particularly be about your chat, but it could be this other factor, which is that people who've emerged from these companies now have such an elevated sense of expectation that any step away from a FAANG level business is kind of a step down. It's absolutely a step down in terms of salary. I don't think anybody can deny that. It's a step down in terms of scale. So, can we imagine doing this ourselves? I mean, if you joined a company at a certain level, and then the other options available are going to be lower in terms of salary, in terms of scale, in terms of responsibility, are you motivated? You got to say the answer is no, right? I mean, yeah. So, folks, let me know. Let me know if you spoke to any Meta, Google, Twitter employees. Let me know how your conversations are going. We don't want to tar everyone with the same brush, of course, but I'd like to know whether you can discern any sort of pattern of behavior that's interesting for us to be aware of, because it could well be that it's not a natural case that they're going to join a smaller business. They're more likely to start something themselves. Jean-Luc, are you going to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, that is super interesting what you all just said. Of course, the pedigree that the people get from working on a FAANG, it's absolutely massive. But there's a very interesting data that I had opportunity to gather, that from the 120,000 people laid off in layoffs.fyi that we have, it's estimated that around 10 to 12% are engineers, right? Normally companies tend to have their software engineers because they're building things in Web 2 and Web 3. And then, let alone before the layoff, the massive layoff of Meta, Microsoft, and Google hired 92,000 professionals in the last 12 months. At the same time that all the big layoffs were happening, right? If we reduce the 11,000, we're talking about hiring 81,000 people. And from those 81,000 people, we know already that 20% are in the tech industry. So we're talking about 16,000. That means that we may think that we have a lot of tech available talent out there from the FAANG companies, but it may not be the case. It may be that they let go other people, and of course, then we will need to match that. But I think it's interesting to think like that.
Very good observation. That's very true. When a big tech company, Meta, let go 13%, 11,000 people, what percentage of those are actually in engineering and product compared to other functions that are considered to be less important? I think one of the features of these big tech companies is they are very engineering orientated, and there is like a hierarchy internally as to what is more valuable. So yeah, it'd be interesting to know within that Meta group who is disproportionately affected. In fact, I don't know whether you read Mark Zuckerberg's letter, but he actually isolated the recruiting function as disproportionately affected. So we were the first to go, right? And recruiters were the first to go, and it's one of those like hard scenarios where we'd like to think that we can prepare ourselves in different ways or find ourselves useful, but you really need to have the culture around you to kind of persist within those businesses. I know we had that kind of cycle in COVID when it first came around, and actually, Christine, you were a good example of this, weren't you? An FT where they kind of kept you around, you
not
know,
hiring.
yeah, and you end up doing other stuff.
Yeah.
But I would say that was probably a COVID specific scenario, maybe specific to FT as well in terms of how they operate. But you can imagine a VC backed business not being that permissive and being quite, you know, here's the guillotine, off you go. Anthony, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to back Gianluca's point up with just another fact as well, because Raoul mentioned the drop in terms of roles on the website, and you mentioned Hung, the Indeed report. That Indeed report that you mentioned actually compared October this year to pre-pandemic levels, and the number of engineering roles is actually 48% higher than pre-pandemic roles. So even though Raoul's seen a slight drop of 20%, there are still far more roles available. So when the likes of Andre and those are looking for, you know, top talent, and to Gianluca's point, there aren't a ton of those that are engineers back on the market. It's no wonder that people are still struggling to fill some of those roles. You take a bucket of engineers that have been let go, you pour it over the cracks of open roles, you've barely even scratched the surface. There's still plenty of gaps in the pavement for roles to be filled.
That's a really good observation, Anton. And the truth be told, that even though the big tech companies are obviously important, obviously significant, overall in terms of the numbers of people they employ, it's actually not that big a percentage. Like we've seen, for instance, that the numbers of layoffs, the people who have been involuntarily sort of on the market, overall is about 100,000 or so. You mentioned, Gianluca, maybe max 150. But that overall is a small number in terms of the volume of vacancies that are still open. And in every territory that you see, the volume of vacancies for technology roles is still exceeding the available talent in there. So the little bit of surge we get from big tech is not going to help fill all of those gaps, particularly if, going to your point, Christine, they've got elevated expectations, or they are entrepreneurial themselves and, you know, want to set themselves up, or activate the alumni network, which kind of is a hidden way to find work, right? They'll simply be a ghost, as Andre says, and they're never going to speak to a recruiter. They'll find work through, you know, their ex-boss who's now CTO at XY at their different company.
Yeah, think about it. How many times you hear ex-Amazon colleagues go on and find ex-companies, ex-Meta like colleagues, right? That's how it happens.
Yep. So how does this loop back to our title then? We're saying, how does big tech layoffs impact the hiring marketplace? I guess on the one hand, it kind of elevates the risk, sense of risk for candidates, but it doesn't inject real volume back into the market. We still have the problem of competing with each other for this talent.
Yeah, Hung. And just to add to that and to echo some of the speakers, you know, one of the metrics we track at Terminal is called candidates per open role. And so what this is, in the UK, essentially we look at this number and we say, well, there's about 10 engineers for every full stack role in the UK, let's say, right? Now, if that changes by 15 or 20%, that doesn't materially bring enough engineers per open role to make it easy to hire, right? If you compare the UK market to markets like Spain, where we have like 30 candidates per open role, you know, the increase that the UK may have by 20% through layoffs really doesn't bring it anywhere near what you see in other markets, right? So you still have that real tightness, that competition that exists.
That's a really interesting number. It'd be great if you could keep us updated with that. See if it's a moving figure for us, because I think you're absolutely correct. Developers have always been difficult as well. Let's not sort of be shy about saying that. They've been in high demand for at least a decade or more, right? So the entire generation of software developers that are operating today have just been used to an abundance mindset where there's always opportunities tomorrow. They're never going to sort of be that vulnerable in terms of being on the open market. So interacting with them is always going to be difficult. What are your thoughts on the sort of conversations we need to be having with them to be effective, though? I mean, let's deal with the risk aversion firstly. How sort of prepared do we need to be to talk about how secure our opportunities are. I mean, is that a conversation we need to have up front? Do we need to get ahead of that concern? What do we do if we are fundamentally quite insecure? Like, you know, Gianluca, you're working in crypto, for instance. You know, it's a new industry. How do you handle all of that? Any thoughts? I'll open it to anybody here.
Good. I can speak from the crypto world, of course, Hang, and I believe there are, again, a lot of projects that are built on thoughts, I will say, but not on solid things. So it's hard right now, and for us, it's easier to find the motivated candidates, but it went even harder because we have had a reduction of 30 to 40% as well in job listings and available talent for us. So for us, is talking transparent. And in our case, of course, we have the regulatory things that are positive into this Wild West. So trying to be transparent and saying the truth and finding someone that has intrinsic motivation of working with Web3. But it's harder, of course, right now than other areas in tech.
Yeah, transparency, I think, is key. You can't BS it, can you? Because, you know, these aren't naive people we're talking about. The individuals that have got experience, have been through the mill. They understand sort of what the market is and how it's been for them. So transparency is the only option, I think, that you have. If you don't have a great runway, you've got to say that. And, you know, the people who are going to be joining you will be the individuals that are prepared, have that risk profile, you know. Christine, you got some observations to make on this, like the conversations to have with the developers that you might be recruiting, and, you know, how do you talk about sort of your organization in a way that is authentic, it's honest, but it's, you know, still attractive in a way to these guys?
Yeah, I think it's also quite different because, again, we operate in a different market. So I can give kind of two scenarios. We just hired a first machine learning engineer, and for the first time ever in my career, I had over 60 inbound applications and all extremely high caliber talent. Again, I think it's just maybe the reflection of the market where we are now and also what we operate in, because we're, you know, in quantum computing, and it's our first ever machine learning hire. So, you know, for that was kind of relatively easy. I didn't really get much kind of pushback. Now, on hiring on the electronics engineering side, as we know, you know, really difficult. All my candidates are from, you know, outside of the UK. So at the moment, I'm trying to speak to someone from Singapore, right? Super safe, super secure. Why would you leave Singapore to come to the UK? Compounded by all the political elements that's happening here in the UK. I had so many questions. Like, I had to literally answer like LinkedIn, email, and phone calls from this one candidate every day, just about what's happening over there politically. You know, is it going to impact the cost of living crisis? How much is rent? And then on top of that, you know, where are you as a business? So I find actually with everything in the UK happening the last 2 months, I actually really struggled with hiring international candidates just because of the state of what we were operating in. So definitely not just job security, but actually the overall country. Like, what are we doing to support our people? So there was a lot of questions. So that was more than just what we do.
So country branding, the brand UK is obviously, you know, it's on the floor. I mean, you can't argue about that.
Yeah.
So relocating people, that's actually a massive consideration. Of course it is. Like, again, the Brits have been used to being like a super attractive place for a long time. Certainly pre-Brexit, it was maybe the number one destination, certainly for European developers. Even, you know, Germany, Netherlands, they were like number 2 and 3 by a long way. But obviously, the friction with regards to Brexit has increased that. Now we've got the tumult politically. We've got the highest inflation ever. We've got, obviously, you know, just a general lack of direction. And so relo is no longer, we have to do destination branding. Like, you have to talk honestly about, okay, what are the circumstances in this business, which one solution might be to completely just keep them where they are and do it via remote, right, Raul? So we'll go to that sort of in a second, but let's sit on the relocation side just a little bit. How important is the attractiveness of your country? I mean, Gianluca, you're the guy living in Spain, I guess. Like how is it looking? I mean, is Spain perceived to be you know, a well-branded organization? Are you doing great in terms of attracting new talent into the country? What's going on over there?
I think we all know the answer, right? People normally go where the sun is, and we have seen this overall. But we were hiring for around 6 different hubs: Bucharest, Vienna, Barcelona, Portugal, Amsterdam, and definitely Barcelona in general, and Madrid has been one of the most, and Porto and Lisbon as well, as places to go. Not just because, of course, the weather and food and whatever you may like, but for example, Spain also has this Beckham law that is the same as Amsterdam, the 30% tax ruling. So it's a combination of things: taxation, these benefits of tax laws, the weather. I can say that Spain has been growing massively.
That's amazing. And, again, the taxation side, these are countries that kind of are aware of the opportunity to just infuse the economy with digital talent. And you gotta provide the environment for that to happen. Didn't Spain also roll out like a nomad visa as well recently, where people can just turn up and spend 12 months there or whatnot? So just open the doors, reduce the friction, allow people to come in. I think the Brits are trying to do that, but it's still, I think there's a massive branding exercise we need to do, because obviously it's a hugely negative message with Brexit. But we need to spend millions government wide to try and change that sort of atmosphere. Because otherwise, we're not going to get the people in. Folks in the audience, what country are you from, and how would you rate your brand of your country? Like, for instance, is relocating people to your country a realistic proposition, or is it something that you think, no, there's too many problems in the way, we can't actually do it, we have to find either local talent or go via Raul's route and just push the job out there and do it from remote?
Raul, I was just going to add in quickly that all of our engineers are based outside of the UK. We have Portugal, Brazil, India. They would never move to the UK. Any of them. I could put my house on the fact that none of them would all prefer to live where they currently are, working remotely in their current home environments. We floated the idea to them in the past, and it was a firm no. So they all work remotely from all over the world, and we'll probably continue to do that in terms of our hiring, as long as we get the best people. We're not precious on where they live.
That's actually really interesting about what the future of tech hiring will be, because how realistic is it to maintain this sense of on-premise hiring? Because let's say you are in the UK, I think a few of us are here, we've got all these like frictions in terms of people coming into the country. I think if you're saying to individuals, hey, you got to also come into the office, that's going to really, really make your job as a recruiter really difficult. Like you've got to have a conversation internally with your CEO and say, yo, we can do this, but the time to hire ×3, the numbers of hires you want me to make, divide by 5, that kind of conversation, because it's going to be very, very difficult to persuade people to do this. Okay, thank you for the comment there, Dali. We'll please do continue to have comments like this. It'd be interesting to see where we're at, because I think certain countries are they just get it, and you understand that if you want a healthy, powerful, strong businesses, you need to have the talent in there. And if you have a talent shortfall, as we've already discussed, it is like you're mining for gold. At some point, those countries are going to successfully acquire the available talent, and they'll be massively more powerful, because that talent will educate the local people as well and level up the entire literacy of the organization. Okay, let's talk about remote hires. Anton, you've said your entire engineering department is remote. Is that the way we think it's going to go? Like, is it like Christine, Gianluca, what percentage of the engineering team are actually remote on premise in your businesses?
0.
Everyone's on premise?
Yes.
Well,
So I'm probably not the right person to ask.
Yeah, you're making things. That's different.
For me, around 40%. 40%. Like and blockchain 100% remote. Even if we have this hybrid with blockchain and Web3, it's 100% remote.
Yeah, and then that's turned into like an expectation already, hasn't it, Gianluca? Like, you can't realistically say, "Oh, we're building blockchain, come to the office."
Yeah, exactly. This is something very interesting, actually, Hang, that you shared on the Brain Food a couple of months ago with the folks of Brick, that they made a survey of 25,000 people, and in this survey, 77% of people said that they have to have remote in their next job. And I can tell you, yesterday I was browsing like my Instagram, and suddenly I saw that in Spain we can have already Starlink services. So imagine if I go to the Pyrenees and I have a Starlink, and maybe with the Quest Pro of Zuckerberg in a couple of years, I will be in a meeting or in a hiring fair in the Pyrenees with 10 times faster internet than 5G. That's a Starlink. And how will you stop that? I think, as Anton says, e-citizenships, and you mentioned Hung, we have Estonia, Spain working on that. E-citizenships and remote, for me, it's the future for sure.
And just Gianluca, just to add to that, you mentioned a survey with, I think you said 78 people who responded wanted to work remote in their next job. At Terminal, we do a state of remote engineering every year, which is a survey of 2,000 people. Consistently, over 70% of engineers say that they wouldn't take a job if it didn't offer remote. So I'm curious, in your business, you mentioned 40% of your team work remotely. Are those the engineers within your organization, or is that a mixture of roles? Because I appreciate it may work better for engineering than other roles.
It's more engineering, yes.
There's also this generational sort of tenure. There's a tenure aspect to this as well, isn't there? Because I think someone's mentioned already about sort of the prospects, career prospects, etc. But if you're, let's say, a junior engineer, and we've all been kind of very motivated to get new talent into technology. But if you're like a first job in, or you've gone through a boot camp or what have you, I can imagine actually being on premise would be something quite attractive, because your opportunity to sit next to a senior developer, senior engineer, someone who's of that type is going to be very educational for you. But then you have the corollary, that senior person is not likely to want to be there. So is it a little bit a case of like drawing up the drawbridge a little bit, where the senior developers that have already got 5 years experience they know what they're doing, they're going to be highly marketable, they're saying, you know what, I'm going to be remote, I'm going to live in the Pyrenees, do what I want. And then you've got a load of people that want in on this industry, but they don't have anybody directly to learn from. They have to do it all themselves. It's almost like, I'm all right, you guys take care of yourself. What are your thoughts on how what that situation looks like, and what do we do about it? Any thoughts on the young, or so we say, entry-level engineers coming in?
I think that's what we need to tackle. Sorry for jumping into that, but that's what we need to anticipate as an industry. It's going to happen. And I think, for example, learning and development or these type of environments to come together online will be a solution. But of course, I will love to hear my colleagues.
Yeah, but I guess this wasn't in a hybrid way. I mean, we look at it in general, like at the FT, we had challenges already anyway. When you get it to a senior level, a lot of our technical engineers just want to remain on the technical track, right? And they don't want to do the coaching element. So you say, well, in order to get to the next stage, I say senior 1, senior 2, principal, lead, whatever, you have to embed that learning and development culture into, in order to get to the next stage, you need to be able to train or mentor some others. So I suppose, in a more hybrid environment, you could do that by, code share, like doing screen sharing, code reviews, etc. There's certain things I'm sure you could be able to embed. So taking like the nuggets of what you do in person and in real life, but trying to do it in a more hybrid approach, I would imagine. I mean, I haven't done it before in virtually, but I imagine that's how you do. Like, if you want to progress to the next stage, this is the little soft skills that you'll need to demonstrate. That seems like it's a simplest approach.
Yeah, I think, Christine, your point before about the struggle of getting people to move to the UK is that problem's elevated even more. So if you look at students currently in the UK, well, if you look at the entire coding workforce and those that are learning to code as well, in the UK, it's 12% of the entire, anybody that codes is 12%. If you compare that to Germany, it's 21% are students. So we're already seeing that we're going to struggle in years to come based on what's coming through the ranks at the moment. And the majority of these people are learning online, Hung. So I have to go against you slightly on wanting to sit next to somebody and learning. I believe that we're going to have to, as UK business, we're going to have to offer out remote work outside of the UK, because we're just not going to be able to find the talent. We're not going to be able to relocate them. It's something that we just have to come to terms with now, rather than worrying about it later, because that skill gap isn't gonna shorten with the number of people going through university at the moment.
Yeah.
And Anton, just to add, with your experience at Stack Overflow, I remember there was always a stat there around, a significant percentage of engineers were all self-taught using tools like Stack Overflow. So when we think about engineering's always been like a decade or so ahead of other roles, right? There were knowledge bases like wikis, Q&A poll websites all around helping upskill engineers well before COVID, well before remote became a paradigm for us. So I think, with engineering, it seems like the default position. I'm actually very curious in what all of your view is around other roles, like non-technical roles, and how the companies of tomorrow will be building teams, based on the fact that some roles will probably be more office-based, others will probably be more remote, like engineering.
Yeah, I've always worked in a business where the majority of the commercial team comes into the office and the engineers very rarely do, unless there's a party after work. So I've always Stack Overflow was like that. My current business is like that. So yeah, for me, it's very natural. And now we're progressing towards hybrid for the commercial team, for example, 3 days a week. We do get a lot of value as a commercial team coming into the office. And to Hung's point before, I think it's more important for, say, a salesperson to learn from someone sat next to them compared to an engineer sat next to them. Because to your point, Raul, the majority of engineers in the UK actually learn online. We're not teaching kids how to code in school like they are doing in Germany. They're starting later, or they're starting on their own. So they're going to coding classes in the evening. They're just practicing code on their own. So it's all remote as it is, behind their own computer.
We've got an interesting comment from Manon in the chat, and I just wanted to address this because this is not just like Elon Musk related, because even before that, there was a little bit of a whisper to say, you know what, if we're going to head into more recessionary environment, actually the shoe is going to be on the other foot. We've had 18 months of high candidate demand. If we have less opportunities in the marketplace, then suddenly the employers might have more authority, and then the employers might start like creeping back the hybrid a little bit. Instead of, hey, listen, we need to come in 3 days a week, and then the 3 days comes 4, and then, hey, listen, let's crash through on Friday, and then before you know it, you're back in. And Elon Musk is the exemplar of this. He's literally, is tweeting out as we speak. But you can imagine certain employers trying this tactic. Actually, no, maybe we can't. I mean, what is your thoughts on this? Do you think it's actually a realistic thing for employers to try and do to pull people back to the office using current market conditions or the anxiety from the market conditions to do this? What are your thoughts on this one? Anton, maybe you could take this to begin with.
I mean, and if you're talking about software engineers, do not start to creep this back in. Unless you're in Christine's, where they need to be on-prem, don't start sneaking it back in, because if you do, you're going to shoot yourselves in the foot in the long term. It's quite clear, I think, from all of the data for the last 10, 15 years that engineers want to work in their own environment. But yeah, that's my view on it, and I don't think it will ever change.
Yeah, so it's going to be basically high risk maneuver to try it, because you're going to get pushback from the engineers.
There was a slight dip I saw in that same Indeed article that for engineering roles, there was a slight dip after July of this year, that there was a slight dip in terms of remote roles, which was worrying to me, because it showed that maybe businesses are actually trying to start to get people back in hybrid, even in engineering roles. So yeah, that was a little bit alarming when I saw that.
That's true. And by the way, so there seems to be that element, doesn't there, where the bifurcation of the market, the candidates are saying we still want remote, but the numbers of remote jobs in relation to of the percentage of the overall posted jobs has decreased. So it could well be that, let's say we have less growth, we're cutting our growth plans from hiring 100 people to hiring 20. Maybe all those 20s are on-prem. So maybe that's going to start happening, and the opportunities of a remote start to constrain a little bit. Okay, thoughts on this? Have you seen this happen? People trying to force the remote. Gianluca, I think I know what you're going to say in your business, because it may not be sort of realistic. But tell us about what you know from other companies also. I mean, have you seen that sense where, what we generally want people back in? We're going to use the excuse of the economic conditions to pull people back on premise?
I agree with Anton what he said before, but I have seen, of course, certain companies doing that, mainly because if you think that you lay off people from your main office, your HQ, let's say, you lay off people, suddenly you have people working alone or two people in an empty office, and that damages the culture as well a lot. You have a huge office or not, or you have a space there that is empty. And this damages the culture. So I have seen that in certain companies that are trying to heal the culture by bringing people on site to actually have again this build up. So this has been one thing that I have seen, and of course in others in engineering, I think it will remain as Anton said. But yes, I think it's happening.
Yeah, Raul, Christine, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so it's a great point. Hung, I speak to several companies a day on this around, the conversation about bringing people back on-prem. It's sort of, even if the company wants to do it, it's sort of dictated by the market, right? So we will speak to companies that say, look, we tried on-prem, couldn't get it to work, couldn't hire enough people in time, couldn't hire at the right cost, couldn't hire at the right time to hire. So we're opening up to remote. So, and we're still hearing the same narrative there, right? So it's still driven by the market. So I don't think the power is quite in the company's hands just yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with Raul as well. I think, speaking to my old team at FT, they were fully not on board with the, hybrid approach, even, well, before COVID. Obviously, COVID then happened. And after that, the team went, hybrid. So even I think if they try to reintroduce it now to the tech team, there's no way the team's going to go back. And I think, onto Raul's point, when the candidate has worked in environments where they had the option to work hybrid and remote, that's what they're going to be expecting in the next role. Like, you're not going to get them back full on. And definitely, I think, for any of you in the audience out there who are maybe potentially struggling because your founders and whatnot's asking you to go back in, just say, well, no one wants to. Like, the market, it's not going that way. So,
and by the way, folks, if that is your situation,
Yeah.
Where you're wrestling with the hiring managers saying we want them on premise, just reach out to us. There's a ton of data out there that we could provide you with, which is not selling any particular story other than what we're seeing from what the candidates are saying, which is that if you're going to try and do on premise, you're going to have increase your attrition. You're going to reduce your ability to hire people. You're going to actually have a big diversity issue. I don't know whether you guys saw that. Was it McKinsey sort of report to say there was a higher rate of women were looking to move, cited number one reason, lack of flexibility in their current employer. So women in particular are starting to migrate out in search of greater flexibility. So if you're going to be on premise, you're more or less saying, hey, we don't care about diversity. That's more or less what you're saying. If you're having that problem with conversations internally, just get in touch with any of us. I'm sure we'll be able to provide you with intel on this. Folks, we are just like speeding towards the end of this amazing conversation. We want to continue it, but do take a moment to ask any of the panelists any questions. I know some of you have asked them in comments, but it's hard for us to keep track of that. So use the Q&A function, put it in there. We want to get to it in about 5 minutes, and we're going to go through those questions at that point. Okay, let's switch focus in terms of how we think our audience should take their best position in reaction to the market as we've seen. So the story is, hey, tech layoffs are happening, economic recession is potentially occurring. What is the way in which companies that are looking to still hire engineers, how can they best sort of position their own businesses to take advantage of the circumstances? So let's go around on this one. Anton, do you want to give this a go?
Yeah, so we saw a massive difference, and it jumps back to something that Raul said before about hiring engineers right now. Engineers are taking their time a little bit. So in Q1 of this year, a reason that candidates were dropping out of the hiring process was the length of the process, the time it was taking to get from A to B. They were having offers thrown at them left, right, and center. Whereas in Q3, Q4, we're actually seeing a lack of company vision is the reason why developers are dropping out of a hiring process. So if you can't clearly identify why a candidate should join you and actually sell that vision, and maybe it puts to bed some of those fears about, is this business going to be around? Are they going to be making layoffs? If you can really sell that company vision, and it's not probably on the website, it needs to sort of breathe through the the veins of everyone within that business. So whether it be the talent acquisition, hiring manager, or anyone that speaks to that candidate, they need to have that same company vision.
All right, I just want to underline that point. I think such a great comment to make, Anton. There's been a shift in terms of what the most critical problem has been. Start of the year, loads of opportunities. You weren't fast enough. Now, of course, we're not saying be slow, but we have a different set of priorities. You need to be able to provide a compelling reason why this person should join your business. And as you say, you can't rely on documentation. You can't rely on what's the marketing collateral to do that for you. You've got to be able to represent and have that conversation human to human. Excellent, Anton. Okay, Gianluca, go to you. What should recruiters be doing to hire developers successfully in 2023?
It's a very good question. I think, first of all, understand that the layoffs themselves are not the real problem, but the hiring freezes. Through history, we have checked that in 87, in 91, in 2000 and 2008, that the real problem of economy downturns are when people are not finding jobs. So unemployment, 90% of the reason of it is people not finding jobs, and the 10%, the actual people that leave, right? So given these, having this in mind, understanding what exactly your competition is doing. And if your competition is in hiring freeze, maybe they are showing a little bit of weakness or holding off. So that's your opportunity to try to get the people that they may have wanted, right? So try to analyze very in-depth your competition and what's happening. And of course, I do believe that if you are still hiring, you have to share that. You have to share that with all your candidates and what are your plans. And as Anton said, vision plus a strategy. So I will add strategy and vision into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely great point. Two great points to mention, but just to sit on that final issue, if the messaging or the discourse externally is all doom and gloom, if you can say something different from that and say, yo, we're still recruiting, we're still doing this, that in itself is going to be great branding for you. So it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to convert the people straight away. You're just signaling positivity against a huge kind of hubbub of negativity. That's great branding. Just sit with that and repeat that message. Okay, Christine, how about you? What's your thoughts on how to do it for 2023?
Yeah, I think onto Gianluca's point as well, looking back to what all the CEOs are saying with these layoffs, we were too optimistic with hiring. I grew the company size too quickly, Jack Dorsey. And I think someone had this question earlier as well, if you got hyper growth next year, right? If you're in that lucky position, something I just told you as well, Hung, I think I'm going to call it mindful hiring. Because I've been in this situation before where, let's say, all the doom and gloom's over, we have headcount again and we're going to start crazily hiring. You don't want to be in the position where you're going to crazily hire and then we're going to go back to the same situation later in the year. So I think really also being strategic with your founders or with the managers, because what we see now is leaner, more agile teams who essentially deliver the same output, right? And we wouldn't really be in this situation if we had hired so many people in the first place. So I think startups can take advantage of this weaker economy and come up on top. If you operate in an inherently leaner business model, you can maximize your value for customers, minimal overheads, and you can stay resilient in this space. So I think as a talent person in the space is, being very strategic, being very mindful with your hiring. And I think as to both Anton and Gianluca saying, being very open and transparent, like we're still hiring, but the reason why we are is because we're being very mindful and we're thinking about every role is a very strategic hire for us. And last but not least, if it's not a rocket ship, don't get someone to come and join your rocket ship because it's not a rocket ship at the moment. So yeah, I think just being very open, transparent, and thinking about your candidate experience and your EVP. Like we're not fast growth anymore at the moment, but everyone that's going to come in is going to help us contribute the future of X.
And there's 2 points there. Firstly, the fast growth story may no longer have the cachet that it once did. We need to completely refresh the language as to how we talk about businesses, because 12 months or so ago, if you didn't have rocket ship in your collateral somewhere, your marketing team was getting fired. You had to talk about the ridiculous scale. But now it's lost credibility, right? It's lost credibility. I mean, the fact that a rocket ship is an emoji itself tells you how much it's influenced the cultural kind of milieu. But if we've got to the point now where we have these radical sort of layoffs, we're kind of thinking, hang on, none of these companies ever made profit, etc. It's no longer having the cachet. So even presenting yourself as an anti-hyper growth type of business might be a clever play. And by the way, I love the concept of mindful hiring. That's something someone should brand. Mindful hiring, because that tells you, again, it kind of overlaps with mindfulness that we've been talking about for most of this past year. But first time we've talked about it from a recruitment point of view. We are more careful. We are more strategic. We don't want to just grow for the sake of growth. We're going to hire according to the business need and make sure that the opportunity you're coming into, you can provide full value to the business as well as full value to your own career. Okay. By the way, Tanya De La Paz, thank you for your comment. I think it's just been pinned there and it's absolutely correct. I think Christine's answered that question in terms of how you handle the hyper growth story. Raul, let's leave you with the final word, man. What's your kind of message to recruiters who need to recruit engineers for 2023?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, firstly, there's less cash, right? So fundamentally, everyone's feeling that. So what do you do when there's less cash? If you need to hire and scale your engineers, you probably need to look at low cost options to doing that. If you can't afford to do more with less, it's probably a good time to, invest in EVP, your talent brand, so you can attract really high quality engineers who you're essentially, getting them to do more with less. But coming back to the first point, remote is a great option for those that still need to scale your team, but want to do so in a cost-efficient manner, right? And I think Gianluca probably can speak to some of this as well, where hiring in markets like Spain, Poland, you save 30-40% of cost there. Engineers stay for twice as long. So, your LTV on every engineer that you hire is longer. And that prevents, that makes the sort of ship more efficient.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's not underrated. People know how to do it, but they've just struggled sometimes to unlock it. Oftentimes with an internal conversation, I think that's the struggle. We've got inexperienced managers basically that don't want to necessarily manage remote workers or manage a remote team. We know it's actually more admin to do that. We need to provide support for those managers to do it well. But the trade-off is you're going to get talented people that stay longer and they're going to be, as you say, greater long-term value. Okay, we've got one more question. I wonder whether we've got time for it. I'm going to try and give it a shot. Let's go for Christian. Christian is saying, in some of these layoffs, CEOs have taken the blame for overhiring the last couple of years. How do we answer potential candidates that are concerned that our company could do just the same? How do we offer confidence, take a less zoomer approach? Actually, we've kind of dealt with that, I would say, with Christine's answer. So mindful hiring. Christian, that's what we've got to try and do. Sell the mindful hiring anti-rocket ship story. Okay, that's about it, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a great conversation. It's a living environment right now. I think we've just jumped into this topic because it's so timely. Do keep your eyes and ears open in terms of what's going on. Let us know, in fact, if you've got any more input in terms of your own opinions as to what the market for tech hiring looks like for this year and next. If you've got any ideas on how we can improve, also do let us know. And make sure you check out Terminal.io. They're a business, I think, launched out of San Francisco, coming to the UK, doing great here. Might be a great opportunity for you to unlock some talent and help scale your engineering team. Okay, that's about it. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.